Do you see Demetrius there, my friend? Once again, it seems his companions have disappointed him.
Indeed. I could not help but overhear someone remark, "That guy is not a person of principle," because if he was, half of the things that happened to him would not have taken place.
An interesting observation, but I wonder, what exactly does it mean to be a person of principle?
Surely you know, Theron, a person of principle is one who adheres to moral rules and beliefs.
Perhaps, but let us examine this more carefully. What, in essence, is a principle?
I would say a principle is a fundamental truth that serves as the foundation for a system of belief or behavior.
And how does one come to possess such a truth?
Through learning, observation, and experience, I suppose.
So principles are not innate, but acquired.
Not entirely. I believe some principles may be innate to our rational nature, while others are shaped by our experiences and education.
Let us consider Demetrius. He appears to live by certain expectations of others. When they fail to meet these expectations, he suffers. Would you call these expectations principles?
No, I would not. Expectations of others' behavior are not principles. A principle must guide one's own conduct, not merely set standards for others.
An excellent distinction. So a principle is something that guides our own actions, rather than a measure by which we judge others.
Yes, though I think a true principle does both. It guides our actions and helps us discern the character of others.
Then let me ask, if Demetrius is continually disappointed by his companions, what might this tell us about his principles?
It suggests either that his principles are not well formed, or that he fails to apply them consistently in his own life.
How so?
If he truly understood and lived by sound principles, he would choose companions whose characters align with those principles. Or, having chosen poorly, he would adjust his expectations or associations accordingly.
So a person of principle not only knows what is right, but acts in accordance with that knowledge.
Precisely. Knowledge of principles without corresponding action is empty philosophy.
And might we say that a person of principle also possesses discernment?
Yes, discernment is essential. A principled person must be able to recognize situations where their principles apply and understand how to act accordingly.
And consistency, perhaps. For what good is a principle applied only when convenient?
Indeed. Consistency is the hallmark of a principled life. A principle applied selectively becomes merely a preference.
So returning to the remark about Demetrius, that if he were a person of principle, half his troubles would not occur. Do you find truth in this?
Yes, there is wisdom in it. A truly principled person would not repeatedly place themselves in situations that contradict their own values. They would learn from experience and adjust their path accordingly.
And yet, might a principled person still face hardship and disappointment?
Undoubtedly. Living by principle does not shield one from all suffering. Indeed, it may sometimes increase one's suffering in an unjust world.
So what distinguishes the suffering of a principled person from Demetrius's suffering?
The principled person suffers while remaining true to themselves. Their suffering comes not from inconsistency or poor judgment, but from the friction between their principles and the world's imperfections.
I believe we are approaching the heart of the matter. A principle, then, is not merely a belief, but a living truth that one embodies consistently, even at personal cost.
Yes, and it requires both wisdom to know what is right and courage to act accordingly, especially when doing so is difficult.
And self-knowledge as well. For how can one live by principle without understanding one's own nature and limitations?
Exactly so. Without self-knowledge, our principles remain abstract and disconnected from our lives.
Then perhaps we can say this. A person of principle possesses clear, well-reasoned values, acts consistently with those values, exercises discernment in applying them, and maintains them even when doing so is difficult or costly.
And such a person chooses their associations wisely, knowing that our companions both reflect and influence our character.
Then, our young friend's troubles may indeed stem from a lack of principle, not in the sense of moral failing, but in lacking this integrated system of belief and action that would guide him toward better choices.
And perhaps the greatest principle of all is the commitment to examine one's life and principles continuously, adjusting and refining them as one gains wisdom.
On that point, my dear Lysander, we are in complete agreement. For the unexamined principle, like the unexamined life, is not worth holding.
Shall we invite Demetrius to join us next time? He might benefit from our conversation.
An excellent suggestion. But first, let me gather our thoughts on how one might cultivate and live by principle.
Please do, my friend. Your summaries always bring clarity.
For those seeking to become persons of principle, I would offer this guidance. First, examine what you truly value, not what others tell you to value, but what resonates in the depths of you and good. These become the foundations of your principles. Second, transform these values into clear guides for action. A principle without application remains merely an idea. Third, practice consistency. Apply your principles in all circumstances, not only when convenient or observed by others. Fourth, develop discernment, the wisdom to recognize which principles apply in which situations and how they should guide your choices. Fifth, choose companions who respect and share your core principles, for we become like those with whom we journey through life. Sixth, when you falter, as all do, return to your principles not with shame, but with renewed commitment. And finally, review and refine your principles as you gain wisdom. The person of principle is not rigid, but ever growing in understanding.
Beautifully stated, Theron. I would add only this. Patience with oneself in this journey is itself a principle worth holding.
Indeed. The path to principled living is not traveled in a day, but over a lifetime.